The next question is, what is the direction of the nerve messages and routes of the spinal nerve? After we have discovered the role of each one. Dorsal is sensory, ventral is motor. Now, we want to know the direction of the nerve message and the following routes and the two routes. Are they going to take messages from the receptor to the center or from the center to the effector organ? Let's have a look at the experiment in the middle here. Section of a ventral root and section of the dorsal root. We're going to start with sectioning the ventral root. Let me call your attention to two words that are going to appear here. When we section the root, we're going to have two ends, like any sectioning done anywhere. Anything you cut is going to have two ends. So here, when we section this root, I'm going to be having two ends. One end here is called the peripheral end. That is the end which has been cut away from the center. It is no longer connected to the center. Then we have another end, which is the other end here, which is called the central end. That is the end which is connected to the center. So I repeat, any sectioning is going to give me two ends, a peripheral end, which is away from the center, cut away from the center, and a central end, this is the end here, connected to the center. Now, the experiment here was done as follows. They sectioned the ventral root, and they did a stimulation at the peripheral end, that is at this end here. They placed the stimulation here, okay? What they observed here in A is the following. Go to the one in orange. The muscle contraction of the region innervated by the nerve, they observed muscle contraction, but in B, when they stimulated the central end here, they observed no response. I'm going to go over it again to clarify it. Sectioning, having two ends, peripheral end here, central end here. We are sectioning the ventral root, which was motor, as you recall. Now, the stimulation of the peripheral end here caused a muscle contraction in the region innervated by the nerve. In contrast to when we stimulated the central end here, there were no response, that is, no motor action. Therefore, this is going to tell you that the nervous message was able to be conducted from here to the region innervated by the nerve, to the effector organ. Therefore, I would reach a conclusion that the message is going to go from the center to the effector. It is going to be conducted in an efferent pathway, which is also referred to as a centrifugal conduction. That is, from the nerve center to the effector organ. Now we're going to go to the third experiment, sectioning of the dorsal root. This root here, which, as you would recall from the previous experiment, it was sensory. It carries sensory neuron. Now, how is the message going to be conducted in this root, in this dorsal root? Here again, they sectioned the dorsal root, as you would observe here. When they sectioned it, they're going to stimulate the central end. This is the central end here. This is the section. Here to this part, this is going to be the central end, which is connected to the center. When they stimulated the central end here, they observed pain. Okay? B, stimulation of the central end. B, pain. However, when they stimulated the peripheral end here, which is cut away, this is the section, this is the peripheral end here. When they stimulated the peripheral end, there was no response. This is going to tell you that here, stimulating the central end, the message went to the spinal cord. But here, when they stimulated the central end, the message could not reach the spinal cord since the pathway has been cut. Therefore, we're going to reach a conclusion here that the dorsal root, which is sensory as we have discovered previously, is going to transmit a message from the receptor to the spinal cord. That is, it shows or it has an afferent pathway from the receptor to the spinal cord, which is referred to as a centripetal conduction. This is the answer to our second question, the direction of the nerve message and the roots of the spinal nerve. I'm going to give you a quick summary to what we have explained. We have discovered so far that the spinal nerve is made up of it is made up of motor and sensory fibers. That the ventral root, we have discovered here that this ventral root, according to the following experiments here, according to this experiment, is motor, because we have a loss of motor activity but maintaining sensitivity. And the dorsal root here and the following experiment is sensory, because sectioning is causing a loss of sensitivity but we still have a motor activity. So spinal nerve is both motor and sensory. Ventral root is motor, dorsal root is sensory. The next experiment was to know the direction of the nervous message. Here in the ventral root, when we sectioned it, we observed that the peripheral end caused muscle contraction. Remember, we're talking about ventral root, which is motor. So the response is going to be motricity. When I stimulate here, peripheral end, I'm having muscle contraction. When I'm stimulating central end, I'm having no response. Therefore, the message is going to go from this section, from this region, from the spinal cord to the effector organ. This is an efferent pathway, a centrifugal conduction. Next was the dorsal root, sectioning it, stimulating the central end is going to cause pain, this is B, but stimulating the peripheral end shows no response, no pain, nothing at all. Therefore, we said that the message is going to go like this, in this direction, which is from the receptor to the spinal cord, which we refer to it as an afferent pathway, which is a centripetal conduction. I hope it's a bit clear now. We're going to go to the third one, which is what are the third question, where are the cell body of the sensory and the motor neuron found? Remember, it is in green because I'm going to be using the green degeneration result, which is found here. When they section the spinal nerve, as you observe here. Before we start the degeneration experiment, let me clarify that since the degeneration affects only the non-attached part of the fiber, the non-attached part meaning the part which is no longer attached to the cell body, these experiments are going to indicate the location of the cell body of the neuron. Now, we're going to start with the sectioning of the spinal nerve. As you would observe here, we have a degeneration of the spinal nerve. When it was cut here and it was cut here, we observed that we have the degeneration to the side and degeneration to the other side. So this is going to tell you that these parts, since they degenerated, have been cut away from the cell body, which contains the nucleus, which must be found towards this part here. This is why we say that the cell bodies of the fibers in here are located beside the spinal cord. Now, the next experiment is going to clarify where are they really found. Next, we are going to have a look at the result of the degeneration experiment when the ventral root was sectioned. That is here. when the following ventral root here was sectioned, it was observed that we have a degeneration of the root that was cut away from the spinal cord, and we have a degeneration of part of the spinal nerve. Not all the spinal nerve has degenerated like here. Do you observe the difference here? All the spinal nerve has degenerated here. Part of the spinal nerve, the green color is part of the spinal nerve has degenerated, with the anterior, with part of the anterior root or the ventral root that was separated from the spinal cord. This is going to tell you that the fibers here, okay, have been separated from the cell body, which must be found in this area. Therefore, we say that the neurons found in the ventral root, their cell body, are located in the spinal cord. So the motor neuron, as you would now know, because this is the ventral root, the motor neuron's cell body are located in the spinal cord. Next, we're going to go to the sectioning of the dorsal root result. Now, in this experiment, where the sectioning was done to the dorsal root, as you would observe, we have here, it might not be very clear, but you can refer to your book as I had previously said. This is the spinal ganglion here, and here this is the spinal ganglion. Now the sectioning was done from both sides of the spinal ganglion. This is one part here, they sectioned here, okay, and you can see that the degeneration happened to the side. And in the experiment here, they sectioned after the spinal ganglion here, and they observed that this here, we have a small green color here signifying the degeneration. So it was observed that the degeneration of the dorsal root from both sides, one side here and the other side here of the spinal ganglion, is going to definitely show that the cell body of the neurons found in the dorsal root, which are the sensory neuron, they are going to have their cell body located in the spinal ganglion here. Remember I told you in the previous slide we're going to know the role of the spinal ganglion in the coming slide. So the spinal ganglion here has the cell body of the sensory neuron. So by now we have answered the third question. Slide 6 and slide 7 are showing you the explanation that I have done when using document D on slide 5. So this is slide 6, showing you the answers to the two questions here, the role of the spinal nerve and the dorsal and ventral root, then the direction of the nerve message and the roots of the spinal nerve. Okay, we go to the next slide, which is showing you the notes or the explanation on the localization of the cell body of the sensory and motor neuron.